Welcome, everyone, to the Leading Together podcasts, Insights for Delaware Tomorrow. In each episode, we sit down with Delaware's top minds and leaders to share perspectives that help advance First Aid Educate's mission to build capacity, raise awareness, and elevate school board leadership across our communities. And today, we're honored to have Jon Buzby. He's the Senior Director of the Unified Champion Schools program at Special Olympics Delaware. And Jon plays a vital role in promoting inclusion and community within Delaware schools. And through his impactful program, this work focuses on building unified sports teams, which he'll tell us more about, that foster youth leadership and encourage whole school engagement in activities that bring together students with and without intellectual disabilities. Jon's efforts have been instrumental in creating supportive, inclusive school environments across Delaware. And in our conversation today, we'll dive into how the program fosters inclusion, teamwork, and personal growth for all of the participants, for students as well as the school communities. And Jon's going to share with us lessons that hold valuable insights for leadership and community building. So, from the impact of unified sports on school climate to the role of coaches in guiding mixed ability teams, I think today you're going to enjoy our conversation and gain some perspective that's really helpful to inspire and empower all of our school communities in our journeys to create inclusive and supportive school environments. Jon, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's a pleasure, Julia. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. So you've been a leader in the Delaware community for over 35 years, and I understand that you're approaching a significant milestone with your upcoming retirement.
I am, yes.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you
You're
very much.
excited.
It's a
That's great.
bittersweet moment, but as I tell people, the best part is the success of my career has been fostered greatly by volunteers, and I plan to jump right back in as a volunteer. And so it's a bittersweet moment, but as I tell people, you'll see me around again.
That's fabulous. Can you share with us? I don't know if it's you want to tell us now, but what any ideas about what that volunteering will look like?
Well, one of the things that I've done a lot of is public speaking and emceeing events, being public address announcer for events both within Special Olympics and outside, and that's the passion that I plan to pursue now that I'm in retirement. I plan to broadcast more. I'm also a sports writer, and I plan to write more. But those are also skills that I can provide Special Olympics and continue to do so. I've emceed our polar bear plunge for the past 20 years. And even though I won't be a full-time employee at this year's plunge in February, I do plan to go down and MC that again. And so just different ways that I know I can help the organization and offer them probably a unique skill set that would be hard for them to find as a volunteer. Not impossible, but if I can say, hey, look, I'll take care of MC in the plunge. That's a big load off of somebody's mind from an events management standpoint.
Well, you're a remarkable Delawarean. You've given your entire career. It's so nice to know that you're going to continue to give. And your work with special education. So let's talk a little bit about that. What drew you to, with Special Olympics, what drew you to Special Olympics, the mission, and sort of why this program?
Well, I kind of fell into it accidentally, to be honest with you. It wasn't on my plans as a phys ed major and a sports management minor in my master's program. But the job opened up, and I had a connection on the board of directors who I knew from the University of Delaware, who asked if I wanted to fill the role at the time, which was running all their sports events, and fill it until they hired somebody. And that person they hired ended up being me. And it was just something, I always said I wanted to make a difference in a sports organization. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can do it as a coach. You can do it as an administrator. You can do it as an official. And this kind of just fell into my lap and seemed to be right up my alley of wanting to make a difference. I'm not going to lie to you. I had never volunteered for Special Olympics until I got to college and had to take an adapted phys ed course, which I ended up teaching later on, and kept Special Olympics as part of that, because really was my only experience working with special needs students. There was not the inclusion that there is back in the 80s and the late 70s when I was going to school. And so that's what we try to provide. And so that's what's drawn me to it. I did teach physical education for a brief period of time in my career while I was also working part-time for Special Olympics. And then I got drawn back in full-time because they created a position for me to work with the coaches. And, I felt I had the skill sets to understand not only how to teach special ed kids with and with that, and then with their partners without the disabilities, but also how to run effective practices and get the most
Mhm.
out of the short amount of time that you have for practices, especially in the school. So there's a
Mm.
combination of a lot of things. But it's something I never look back and wish I had done something differently. I feel like I have had an impact. More importantly, I think I've sold the program to people. I always
Mhm.
love hearing when I hear a unified partner is now a special ed teacher, and it's
Mm.
because they got that involvement in our unified champion school program in their school
Mhm.
growing up in school, whether it was elementary school, high
Right.
school, or middle school, whatever it was. And so
Yeah.
a lot of different things, but it's been a very rewarding career and one
Mhm.
that I've encouraged a lot of people to consider
Mhm. Mhm.
going into Special Olympics.
Yeah, I love that. I love that approach because I think it really embodies what we hope for a lot of our school boards, right? Where you're promoting through your own awareness of something, right?
Mhm.
The value of inclusion and belonging and creating these supportive environments. You've learned that, you saw that, and now you're seeding that, and you're helping other people see and appreciate how what a remarkable experience it is. So, but why inclusion and belonging? Why this need to what why did you know it was important to create a supportive environment for all kids?
Well, you see, I saw it as a teacher, and in reflection, I now realize I saw a lot of it when I was a student back in high
Mm.
school, and we just didn't include the kids with special needs. You knew who they were, and they got made fun of. They certainly didn't get
Mhm.
included, and so it's just the realization. And I always use the word quirky. We're all quirky, and
Mhm.
so a special needs student that has some quirks, whatever they might be, is no different than anybody else, and they need to have an opportunity. And if we made a list of people's quirks and then defined what they were allowed to do in the school settings based on their
Sure.
quirks, there'd
Sure.
be a lot of people missing out on a lot of different things.
I'm sure
And
there's a lot of people thinking about my quirks right now as you're giving that answer.
it's I
So,
always say you
I
could ask
have
my
them. I definitely
wife.
have them.
My wife's got a
Yeah.
long list of quirks, and
Mhm. Mhm.
for me, I mean, for me,
Uh-huh.
and I always say that, and it's just the reality of it. And I don't know what it was that triggered me to think, wow, we really need to change this. There have been so many examples over the years,
Mhm.
that I've had. And here's one. My 32-year-old son started out as a unified partner when he was 8 years old, just like my other two
Mm.
sons have. And he came home from lunch one day in middle school and he said, "Dad, I think one of your athletes has lunch with us." Athletes meaning Special Olympics athletes.
Mhm.
And I said, "Oh yeah, who is it?" She told me the name. I didn't recognize it,
Mhm.
which is not
Mhm.
uncommon
Mhm.
when there's 4,000 athletes in the state. And he said, "Oh yeah, how come he
Right.
has lunch with you?" And he said, "Well, we invited him to join us. He was eating lunch by himself, and so we had him come over on the first day of school and have lunch with us." And
Aw.
and this is October now when we're talking, and he's been going on for five
Wow.
weeks. And I'm not sure that happens if my son doesn't get involved in Special Olympics
Sure.
as a unified
Sure.
partner
Yeah.
back in what was elementary school for him, and
Right.
realize that just because this student is in a special needs classroom at the
Mhm.
time doesn't mean that he wouldn't enjoy having lunch with us and have a conversation and talk. They don't talk about math when they're at lunch. They talk about life.
Exactly.
They talk about
Right.
life,
Right.
and
Yeah.
every student in the building has a
Sure.
life, whether
Yeah.
it's good, bad,
That's
indifferent, or whatever. And so,
yeah.
it was those kinds of things that made me think that, we have to get these kids included. Does every kid want to play sports? Absolutely
Yeah.
not. Just like
Sure.
regular ed kids, not everybody wants to
Sure.
play sports, and that's just the reality of
Mhm.
it. But if they
Yeah.
want to, Special Olympics gives them a great place to do that.
Yeah, I think I love that illustration too because through the kindness and the I don't know, the innocence almost of
Mhm.
children, we get a great example of what it would be wonderful for all people at all ages to act
Yeah.
like, right? And I think this idea of inclusion and not looking at difference is it's important for children in schools, but it's also important for adults. And I
Mhm.
love that because we can always reach out to someone who's a little bit different from us, whether it's in the way they think or their opinion or any of these quirks that we all
Right.
have
Mhm.
and invite them to be part of our group or to have a conversation with us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does. It comes into adulthood, but it starts at such a young age. And I always, when I talk
sure.
to groups, I liken it to ice skating.
Mm,
If you put on a pair of skates when you're 4 years old, you don't know any better, and you learn to ice
right.
skate, and you don't have the
Sure.
fears. if you've never been on ice skates or never skied, I've never skied, and I have
Mhm.
no interest in learning how to ski now because if I fall, it's gonna hurt and it could break a
Right.
leg and et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
regret not learning how to ski as a kid when I had no fears. It's
Sure.
the same thing with inclusion. If we bring
Mhm.
people with and without disabilities together in preschool, which
Mhm.
is what's going on across the state,
Mhm.
they call each other friends. They don't call each
Right.
other, or as
Right.
I say,
Right.
my sister texted me the other day, what's the definition of somebody or how do you refer to somebody who has a disability? Because she's a teacher. She wanted to know my opinion. I said,
Sure.
we call them by their first name.
That's a great answer.
I
That's a
mean,
great answer.
and they don't need to be defined.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so the more we can include people at early ages, they grow up together. And it's this way for
Mhm.
everything you can think of: race, intelligence, income-based families, all the categories we can put people in.
Sure.
If we bring those categories together when these kids are 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old, they don't know any different
Mhm. Mhm.
unless the parents point it out. Unless the
Mhm.
parents
Mhm.
point it out. And they grow up
Yeah.
together and they don't look at race, they don't look at color, they don't look at income, they don't look at
Yeah.
test scores. They
Right.
enjoy being around each other. Are there still
Sure.
cliques? Absolutely. But what I found is in those cliques, when my son has a group of friends over, it's all those
Mhm.
categories I just talked about. Whereas 30
Right.
years ago, everybody that would have been in this house would have been just like my child.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and I think these are great illustrations of how your program and this Unified Champions Schools program really helps to improve climate and culture in participating schools. So
It
let's
does.
flip
Yep.
now to
Mhm,
academics. I mean,
mhm,
athletics. So
mhm.
athletics is an important part of a well-rounded education, right? Providing students with opportunities because it's a little bit about the physical part of the sport, but it's more to it, right? There's personal interactions and social interactions and becoming a team. There's emotional growth. And so in with unified sports, you've got students with varying abilities that come together to do this. How do you see sports fostering social, emotional, personal development among children?
It's an opportunity for people to participate in something that, especially at an early age, and especially in Special Olympics, that's in a non-threatening environment.
Mhm.
A lot of our programming takes place where people do win gold, silver, and bronze in our school
Mhm.
activities, but we have a lot of programs where they all receive the same medal.
Mm.
And so it gives them that chance to not be in a threatening atmosphere as an athlete. And here's one of my favorite parts about unified sports, and this is all over the country, not just here in Delaware, is it gives kids an opportunity to play a sport they love, but that they're not good enough at to play for the high school
Mhm.
team
Mm.
or the travel team, or even sometimes even in the rec leagues,
Mhm.
not only from a skill standpoint, but sometimes from a financial standpoint.
Sure.
I've met a lot of players who play soccer for us in the unified
Mhm.
sports program because it takes place during school hours. And if you ask them why they don't play in the local league, they'll either say, I don't feel like I'm good enough,
Mhm.
or my parents can't afford it, or
Mhm.
give they can't. My mom works, my mom and dad work crazy hours and they can't get me to the practices. And so unified sports fosters opportunities not only for people with and without disabilities, but for
Mhm.
athletes who want to be athletes but can't be. And same thing for our special needs population. We
Mhm.
call them the athletes. There's not a sports program in the country who will tell you we don't accept people with disabilities, but do those programs have the program in place to
Mhm.
have somebody with a disability? And,
Mm.
and not just a intellectual disability. I once coached this roller hockey player who was deaf,
Mm.
and the YMCA had to put in place. They had to have an interpreter there so that when I
Mhm.
was talking from the sideline to this child,
Sure.
he knew what I was saying because the
Mhm.
signer was
Mhm.
able to relay that message. And
Yeah.
so, unified sports naturally fosters inclusion,
Mhm.
but it's inclusion in general, and that's another thing I stress to people. Our program is not about bringing people with and without disabilities together. It's
Mm.
about bringing people together.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
includes teachers and
Yeah.
paraprofessionals and administrators and the students, and
Sure.
in some cases, parents. I love when I get a phone call from a parent whose child was a unified partner for the first time,
Mhm.
and they tell me that was the best experience their kid
Mm.
has ever had, that they
Oh,
learned
nice.
more during that 2 hours or whatever
Mhm.
time it was than they ever, it's more important than math class, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Sure.
Math is important, but being able to be with people of different backgrounds and abilities
Sure.
and
Sure.
communicating with them, that is what
Right.
serves people the most down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like a human development skill, right?
Yep.
It's like what do you need for to be a good member of society? The other
Yep.
phrase I like that you seem to use is like mixed ability teams,
Mhm.
And is it about a disability or not? I think your sister's question was really respectful and shows a lot of,
Mhm.
thoughtfulness. If we could talk about your program in the context of disabilities or a person that doesn't have a disability, but this mixed ability team, all of our teams in everything we
Mhm.
do are mixed ability because
Yep.
we all come with our own strengths and weaknesses.
Mhm.
So for boards, to bring it back to what First Aid Educate does, for boards, they're mixed ability in the sense that someone's good with numbers and someone's good with people and someone's good with language and someone's good with communication, right? And
Mhm.
so why do you think mixed ability teams in whatever manifestation they show up in,
Mhm.
why is that a good thing for people to learn how to be successful with?
You just gave the best example. A board of
Mm,
directors, mixed abilities, and a board
mhm,
cannot be successful if they don't admit and understand that
mm,
they are a group of people with not only mixed abilities, but mixed opinions, and that
mhm,
everybody's got an opinion about everything. There's no question about that. But not just in boards. When I walk into my building, we have a staff of 14 people, all
mhm,
mixed abilities, mixed
mhm.
personalities,
Sure.
all with opinions, all with perceptions, all with
Yep.
quirks. And yet
Yep.
we have to learn to get along together
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
achieve our mission in
Yep.
what we do. And it frustrates me, when I follow boards of directors and, some are great, some are issues, and we can go through the list of every board in the state, and I have a comment about all of them, but we don't have time for that.
Okay.
But it always, it worries me when a vote for something important wins by a scale of 3 to 2,
Mhm.
because to
Mhm.
me, that means, okay, we've got 5 very important people on a school board, or 7, or whatever they are,
Mhm.
they vary,
Mhm. Mhm.
and they couldn't come to a unanimous agreement about
Mm.
this policy or this
Mhm.
rule
Mhm.
or something like this. And one of the biggest things that's going to be important to boards in the next couple of years is this whole cell phone issue.
Mm.
And I don't want to get in the mud, but whatever's decided about that, it should be a 5 to nothing vote of
Mhm.
agreement. There shouldn't be
Mhm.
2 board members adamant against it. And if they are, what is it that's keeping it from being a 5 to
Mhm.
nothing vote, and why can't
Mhm.
we get to that point where we all
Mhm.
agree that this is going to be it? Congress runs
Mhm.
the same way.
Mhm.
We have a new
Mhm.
policy,
Mhm.
and one person, one vote, wins by one vote. So what
Right.
do we
Right.
really think
Right.
about it?
Right. Yeah.
But getting along, so on our bocce teams, I'll use an example.
Mhm.
We have 4 players, 4 students, and 2 of them have a disability and 2 of them do not. And
Mhm.
what I love about the sport of bocce, and I started this 4 years ago, it's been in Special Olympics for a while. We just started in schools coming out of COVID. It was kind of like a perfect way to do it for a lot of different reasons. But the
Okay.
bottom line was we started it and it's worked. And 2 years
Mhm.
ago, I would have a teacher tell me, "Give me your A team. Tell me who the A team is," which means it's your
Okay.
2 best unified partners and your 2 best Special Olympics athletes.
Okay.
And I put all the A teams in one group. And then I had a
Uh-huh.
B team, which had the lesser abled athletes and lesser abled partners. And then I
Okay.
stopped doing that because, again,
Mhm.
our job, my job, is to bring people with and without disabilities together of all difference. And what
Mhm.
I was doing
Mhm.
immediately was separating them. And it
I
dawned on me
see.
about halfway through
Yeah.
the season.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
now I've gone the opposite. And I tell teachers, you should have 4 players on a team, 2 with about 2 without a disability, 2 with a disability,
Mhm.
but the 2 without should be different skill levels, and the
Mm.
2 with should be different skill levels, because
Mhm,
now I've
mhm.
got 4 different ability levels, and it's not
Right.
only from a sports standpoint, it's from a social standpoint, because I
Mhm,
want
mhm,
I want that star athlete, that unified partner, and I'm gonna use my son as an example. He plays 3
mhm,
sports for Appoquinimink High School. On his bocce team
mhm,
is probably one the lowest in ability and communication skills for a person with a disability. And his
mhm,
teacher put them together because they knew it would be good for both of them. And
mhm,
so
mhm,
my son's college essay has been
mhm,
about his experience with Special Olympics and how he has had to learn how to communicate effectively with
mhm,
3 different people in 3
mhm.
years. And as he says, I had to learn how to keep a conversation going when the answer was always yes. And
Uh-huh.
he said, so what I did is I came up with questions that could not be yes or no answers. And
Mhm, mhm.
all of a sudden, his partner was communicating with him with
Yep.
answers. And
Mhm.
so that's just an example. And this, my son's a good kid. He's a smart kid. He's a good
Sure.
athlete. He's going to college. But in 10 years, he's going to tell people the biggest thing he learned and most important
Mhm,
thing he learned in high school was how to be with other people who are not like him. And I don't
mhm.
mean all those
By
people
ability.
have
Sure.
disabilities.
Mhm, mhm.
People who are not like me, they have different opinions, they have different
Sure.
attitudes, they have different
Mhm,
personalities. And that's what we try to do in unified sports is we try to bring all those differences
mhm,
together, and they're together for
mhm,
a day, several days for practices. They come to an event. And then
mhm,
what we see is the example I gave with my oldest son earlier on. All of a sudden, they're together at recess,
mhm,
and they're
mhm.
together at lunch, and they're
Right.
together outside of school at birthday parties.
Mhm, mhm.
And so, one of the coolest things, and excuse me if I'm talking too long, we held the
Very good.
volleyball. We held the volleyball dinner, pasta dinner at my house, varsity volleyball at Appoquinimink. And one of the
Mhm,
players won a state championship the season
mhm,
before in unified basketball, which is a
mhm.
DIAA sport. And
Awesome.
when he walked in, one of the other players said, "Thank goodness somebody who has won a state championship before is in the house." And it was one of the coolest things. And again, wasn't prompted by me, and it
Sure.
hadn't even dawned on me that you're right. We've
Yeah,
got this room full of star athletes at
yeah.
Appoquinimink High School, and the only
Mhm,
kid who's won a state
mhm,
championship was a kid with
mhm.
a disability. And
Yeah.
it was just one of the coolest things. So again,
Yeah.
being able to get along with everybody. That's
Yep.
what it's
I
all
I
about.
like that. I love the example too about your son and learning how to communicate. I think, I can say personally, it's a developmental path for me too,
Mhm,
finding the right way to express my ideas, and making sure that I'm aware of the listener, my
mhm.
the co-participant in that dialogue, right?
Yep.
And framing the ideas the right way. I also think that it's so important to learn to not ask questions that produce a one-word answer.
Mhm.
And one of the things that at First Aid Educate we're really interested in promoting is this discussion during the board meetings,
Right.
so that that conversation and that sharing of perspectives is available for the public to understand how are
Mhm.
these decisions made,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
then I think when we talk about how we landed wherever we land with a particular opinion, it allows someone else to engage with us because we've given them much more to work with, right? And
Right.
you can kind of find some common ground. That's
Mhm.
great. So what other thing that I think you're talking about too is that these participants are building relationships. And so
Mhm.
do you think that in some ways, because the participants and the student athletes um, develop relationships, that they're better able to engage in teamwork and collaboration to achieve their goal kind of in the sport?
I think anytime you can work on your skills anywhere, any place, any skill, doing anything, it carries over somewhere.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And, I've seen lots of it, and you hear about it. And sometimes I think what teams have to realize, and I'm talking about teams at all levels,
Mhm.
is working with our Special Olympics athletes, working with people of different abilities, sometimes brings life into perspective. And I'll
Mhm.
give another quick example. We
Okay.
partnered with the University of Delaware field hockey team, nationally ranked, past several years, won a national
Mhm.
championship. I think it was 2016. So big time team. They ran a training program for some of our athletes. This was outside of school.
Mhm.
And then they wanted to honor those athletes. They wanted them to be honorary captains at one of their games this year. And so
Mhm.
I was asked to go and kind of oversee that, and I did. And it was during warmups before this big game,
Mhm.
everybody's serious, et cetera, et cetera. And we had to walk the athletes across the field to where they were going to be honored. As soon as the field hockey players saw them,
Mhm.
warm-up stopped. They ran
Mhm.
over. They were high-fiving. They were hugging. It's like they were long-lost friends.
Yeah.
And I think that provides a perspective to a team that, you know what, we want to win, but
Mhm.
there's more to life than winning.
And winning. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
kind of brings it down. And,
Mhm.
sometimes back to your board example, sometimes I wish when they were making a serious decision, positive, negative, whatever, that they would allow students to give their opinion. Now, I know they
Mm.
do allow that, but
Mhm.
I don't think they encourage it. And I don't
Mhm.
think one of the big things we do in Special Olympics is we have an entire program for athlete leadership where we give our
Mm.
athletes a voice. We have 2 athletes on our board of directors.
Okay.
We have athletes on our summer games committee and our fall
Uh-huh.
festival committee. We have athletes on just about every committee we have. So they have a voice.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
amazing, and I'll be honest with you, I was against this originally, and this was 15 years ago when it started because I
Mhm.
thought, "You know what? This is just gonna make our meetings longer." Is all it's gonna
Okay.
do. But that's not the case. When they talk, it's valuable opinions, and it's
Mhm.
often things that we don't think about when we
Yeah.
make decisions. We don't because we've never been in their shoes before.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
have several half of our board has never been an athlete before at any
Mm.
level. And so
Mhm.
they don't always understand the perspective from an athlete standpoint. Same thing
Sure.
on our staff. Our staff of 12 people, I think there's 3 of us who were ever varsity athletes.
Mm.
And again, there's no requirement that you had to be,
Right.
but we make sure when we are making decisions as a staff, we look at it from an athlete standpoint because
Mhm.
that's what our people
Mhm.
are that we serve. They're athletes in our
Sure.
eyes. They're people,
Yeah.
but they're athletes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that it just provides a lot of it fosters relationships is what we do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and that's I'm a big sports guy, and I love to say that the sports is the most important thing that we do. And when I do say
Mhm.
that, it's because that's what I tell people. It's important, the most important thing we do because it's what brings people together with and
Mhm.
without
Mhm.
disabilities.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I would agree with you that it's important to include the opinions and the thoughts of everyone who's impacted by a
mhm,
decision, and I think it's really insightful uh, to be intentional about bringing in a voice that may not have been included, right?
yep,
Creating, I mean, in your example, you're talking about the voice of the athlete, which I think is important,
mhm.
but really in every context more engagement, more participation, more community voice allows us to make better decisions because we're hearing really from more of the people who are impacted.
I think the state should have a requirement that on every school board, there needs to be 3 more voting members, a
Mm,
student,
hmm.
a teacher, and an administrator.
Interesting.
They are when you look at the boards across the state, and I pay some attention to it, but not intensive like
Hmm.
you do, and you may know a better
Hmm.
answer
Hmm.
than this. They've all been students. Most have
Hmm.
not been educators,
Mm,
and most have not been administrators.
hmm.
And so
Hmm.
they don't truly understand the impact of whatever, and I have this
Mm,
argument with my wife a lot of, "Well, why
uh-huh.
can't they do this? Because you have no
Right.
idea
Who's
what it
also an
takes to get
educator,
that
right?
done." Who's also an
Yep.
educator.
Right. Hmm.
And 30 years as in a high
Yeah.
school. I was an elementary
Yep.
educator, phys ed for 7 years, whole
Hmm.
different animal.
Sure.
But my point being, it's easy to say, "Well, we can't do we cell phones gotta be turned in when they walk in the classroom." And the 5 people that are making that decision, even if it's a 5 to nothing vote, have never been in a
Hmm.
classroom
Hmm.
have
Hmm.
never had to be the person that's gonna be responsible to where are those
To
phones
execute.
going, who's
Yeah.
watching it,
Hmm.
where are they
Mm.
staying, this, and this. And so
Interesting.
it's another
Yeah.
opinion, and even maybe if you don't give them a vote,
Uh-huh.
they're at the meetings and
Yeah.
they're at the discussions and they have a
Sure.
voice. because
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know all the rules for board meetings, but I'm not
Mhm.
sure I'm allowed to stand up and raise my hand and give an opinion without if I haven't told them that. Or I know that's how DIAA committees work, but my point being is there should be those three entities should be represented
Mhm. Yep.
in those meetings on the stage or at the table with an opportunity to speak
Yeah.
uninterrupted
Mhm.
and give their opinions about how they feel about whatever it
Mhm.
is they're getting
Mhm.
ready to vote for.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you shared that. We try at First Aid Educate. We really want to promote access to information, best practices, what's happening nationally, who are the local experts we could talk to, what works in other districts. And I think the way that we get there is through a robust conversation and hearing ideas like yours, because I would love to believe that there are many, many, many other Delawareans who are out there who also have a thought or two, right, about
Mhm.
how this should work, how it could work better. And there's no right answer, right? The boards have to figure out what's going to work for their communities. But I think this idea, in its most global sense, of including the perspectives of everyone who's impacted is
Mhm.
critically important.
Yeah.
So
No.
one, I want to flip to the coaches are important, right? And this is
Mhm.
it's kind of related to I guess the functioning of a board. The board has they have each other, right? First
Mhm.
Aid Educate tries to provide supports to them. Um, but I think optimal performance comes when you have a coach. If you want to do personal training, if you want to be ready to run a marathon, if you're studying for the LSAT and you want to having a coach is helpful. Could you
Mhm.
share just one example of what the coach's role is in supporting the success of mixed ability teams?
Well, basically, a coach is like a moderator, and that's
Mm.
another thing some of these boards need,
Good
and
boy.
I won't name the ones that do, but they need a moderator. But a coach is basically like a moderator, and if you can't bring a team together and have them all playing for the same purpose, with
Mhm.
everybody feeling like they are part of that team in some
Yeah.
way, your
Mhm.
team is not gonna be as successful as it could be. They might still win,
Sure.
but they probably wouldn't have fun doing it across the board.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
my goal as a coach, and not to be honest with you, I don't think I've coached the Special Olympics team. I've been part of a
Mm.
lot of training and stuff, but I
Mhm.
was a youth coach for all of my kids. Coached at the high school a couple times, and my goal as a coach at the end of the season was that the kids would not remember whether we won or lost in 10 years, but they would look back and say, you know what, that year that we played on that 5-year-old T-ball team with Coach
Mhm.
Buzby, and
Mhm.
they might not even remember my name,
Yeah.
that was a fun time.
Mhm.
And whether the star player says it or the kid that was the 12th kid on a 12-man team coming off the bench
Uh-huh.
said
Right.
it. And that happens when you make everybody feel like they're part of the team. And there's a lot of
Sure.
different ways to do that. When I
Mhm.
was coaching freshman basketball, my star player forgot his sneakers coming to the game. The guy who was the 12th guy on the team, basically the scorekeeper, offered him his
Mhm.
shoes. And I
Hmm.
told him, I'll never forget his name. His name was Justin. I said, "No, what, Justin? No, it's not your fault that he forgot his shoes. In fact, Justin, you're going to start for him today." And he
Oh,
did.
wow.
And the
Uh-huh.
parent at the end of the season told me, "My son will never have a better experience than when you put him in that starting lineup, and
Uh-huh.
not because of the skill part, the anything else." He said, "But you set an example for
Mhm.
everybody on that team that they all had a responsibility. They're in ninth grade. These
Mhm.
aren't
Mhm.
4-year-olds.
Mhm.
And if you forget your shoes, you don't have shoes, you can't play." And
Play,
that
right.
it was more important to teach that lesson than
Mhm.
it was to win that game. And
Yeah.
I don't even remember whether we won or lost or who we played,
Right.
but I
Mhm.
remember that
Mhm.
moment. I also remember the
Yeah.
same moment 2 games later when we were winning by a lot, and
Uh-huh.
Justin got put in the game because we were up by a lot, and he
Mhm.
scored the first time all
Ah,
year. The
fabulous.
other
Yeah.
11 players acted like we had just won a state championship.
Mm.
That's how you build a team,
Yeah.
because everybody had a role. Everybody knew what their role was. For Justin, most of the time it was keeping score,
Mhm.
but they respected Justin so much because we included
Sure.
him in everything. We never treated
Mhm.
him during practice like he was the scorekeeper, or
Mhm.
he wasn't treated that way in school. We
Yeah.
developed that team.
Yeah.
And if
I
boards
love
could
that.
do that,
Sure.
imagine how
Yeah.
more successful boards would be
Yeah, yeah.
if, because I guarantee, and again, I think you and I talked about this in preparing for this. Boards don't do team building activities.
Mhm.
Every other good staff in a business, a nonprofit, anything,
Sure.
they have team building activities. A team building
Right.
activity can be walking from my office to the UD Creamery, which we do a
Uh-huh.
lot of, unfortunately, for our
Mhm.
diets.
Uh-huh.
But that's what that is. It's team building.
Right.
And you get a chance to talk to people you don't interact with from different departments, and you sit and you talk, and
Mhm.
there's no talk about work.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
it's that simple. Or you can pay
Yep.
somebody to come in and do team building activities. But we all leave retreats,
Yeah.
we go to conferences for our businesses and organizations, and we all
Sure.
are more motivated when we come back to work
Mhm.
together to make a
Right.
difference. School
Yeah.
boards don't do that, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah.
They meet
So
once
it's
a month.
Yeah, we're working again. I mean, I think everyone's recognizing that there are people who are tasked with enormous decisions who've
Mhm.
raised their hands to
Yep.
support the communities, and there's an opportunity to create a supportive system around them. And First Aid Educate is really trying to do that. So we have a mini grant program where we try to allow for some of that team building if there's the initiative to do that. We
Mhm.
also provide consulting services around Clifton Strengths. So there's a coach that comes in that helps them understand and work with each other. But we agree. We think that the more support that they could have to function as a team and the more opportunities to invest in them, the better. So that
Mhm.
was a great example. And before we wrap up, John, this has been fabulous. I can't thank you enough. I'm excited for you for your retirement. I'm happy to know that you're still going to be giving because clearly you have so much to give to the community. I've learned so much about mixed abilities and how teamwork can happen and the importance of a coach, including different perspectives, each one of us knowing our own role. I mean, you've shared so many pieces of wisdom that I think were great in your immediate context, but also directly applicable to what First Aid Educate is trying to do. So thank you for doing that.
Glad to hear it.
I have
Yep.
one final request. If you would do me the honor of um, sharing the story when there was a championship game and everyone was going to leave, and I think at dismissal when the team was going to
Mm.
come out, the
Mhm.
school community did something. Could we close by sharing that story with our
Sure.
listeners?
Absolutely. And I've seen this go on at a lot of schools, and it's just a
Hmm.
wonderful, simple thing that they're able to do. And we call it
Uh-huh.
whole school engagement.
Okay.
And some schools, and I'm not going to name them because I'll forget one and it's not fair, but a lot of them do it. And they do this at
Sure.
all different levels: preschool,
Hmm.
uh, elementary, middle, and high school. And when a
Hmm.
team is leaving for a Special Olympics event, they have the entire school leave their classrooms, come out into the hallway, and the team
Hmm.
goes around the school and gets high fives and
Yeah.
applause and all that kind of stuff. The same thing that a lot of schools do when their varsity teams leave to go to a state tournament or to an important
Nice.
game like that. And
Yeah.
so imagine the feeling for these kids, and I call them kids because they are. And
Hmm.
even I saw a video, and so I am going to say it was at Appoquinimink High School because that's
Uh-huh.
where my kids go. And somebody
Uh-huh.
sent me a video of my two kids who are both varsity athletes, have played in front of thousands of people over the years,
Uh-huh.
smiling ear to ear as they're
Yeah.
walking through the school. And again, everybody knows my kids. That's what happens when you're an
Uh-huh.
athlete.
Uh-huh.
And some people would say, "Well, that must have been embarrassing." And my kid said, "It was the greatest thing because
Yeah.
we were being celebrated, and more importantly, our teammates were being
Mhm.
celebrated who have
Yeah.
never been celebrated like this before. They're not
Yep. Yep.
athletes for the school." And
Yeah.
so it's just a small way. And all that took was for somebody to go on the PA system and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, we just want you to walk out into the hallway for the next
Sure.
5 minutes." And
Yep.
think of the difference that that made. Talk about, those kids won't remember what medal they got at bocce, but when
Mhm.
they're at
Mhm.
Thanksgiving dinner, they're going to talk about how great it
Yeah.
was that the whole school created
Right.
a high five tunnel for
Right.
them to come
Right.
out of. And
Yeah.
so it's
I lo
little things, little things.
Yeah. I love the way that story makes me feel, and I also think that, again, just to close with the mission of First Aid Educate, I mean, we want to the phrase we use is to catalyze the power of Delawareans, but the vision is the same, that every Delawarean stands up and
Hmm.
says, "We're here and we're behind the people who are trying to make our public schools even better," right?
Yep.
And it's a team effort, and we're gonna high five you and we're gonna support you along the way.
Mhm.
Jon Buzby, thank you so much. Again, congratulations on a fantastic career, all the work you've done with Special Olympics, and thank you for sharing your insights with us today, and all of the best in your retirement.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for the work that you and your organization do. Because as a parent, I appreciate that, and so always
Thank
happy
you.
to come on and chat.
Thanks, Jon. Thanks. Bye, everyone.